We have been focusing on the Psalms this summer in worship, and my sermon is in keeping with that theme. I will preach in regards to Psalm 130, and I will begin, first I will read it in the New Revised Standard Version in English, and then I will sing for you, actually, 2 verses of the Genevan Psalter's setting of that psalm in the French of Clément Marot, his rhyming paraphrase. I will sing the first and the last stanza or strophe as he paraphrased it, and then I will continue with my own meditation. Psalm 130. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, so that you may be revered. I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord more than those who watch for the morning, more than those who watch for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord. For with the Lord there is steadfast love, and with him is great power to redeem. It is he who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities. Du fond de ma pensée, au fond de tous amis, à toi s'est adressé ma clameur jours et nuits. Entends ma voix plaintive, Seigneur, et les saisons, ton oreille attentive, sois mes oraisons. Qu'Israël en Dieu fonde, hardiment son appui, car en Dieu grâce abonde, et secours est en lui. C'est celui qui sans doute Israël jettera hors d'iniquité toute et le rachètera. A little bit of Huguenot heritage for you with that. As we have been discovering, or at least reminded this summer, the Psalms run an extreme gamut of moods, themes, and emotions. Some of them are joyful to the point of ecstasy. Some contain angry, aggressive language with a very uncomfortable intensity. I could refer especially to Psalm 137, perhaps the most violent of them all. If that isn't ringing any bells for you, you might review that psalm, especially its ending, at your leisure. The psalm for today, number 130, contains striking interplay of dark and light, desperation and hope. To attempt to come to understand its message to us, I'll begin at the beginning. The psalm opens with a very strong image. The speaker is crying out of the depths. We know that it is a metaphor, but to appreciate the image, let's pause to consider it more literally. What is it like to be a child who has fallen down a well, or a prisoner in a dungeon, or a worker trapped down a mine shaft? Let's pause for a moment and think of the darkness, the limited movement, the stifled breath, and the anxiety about whether one will be rescued. Of what depths is the psalmist speaking? He speaks surely of a place of spiritual darkness and powerlessness. The speaker feels weak, vulnerable, and distressed, and deprived of godly light, like someone abandoned in a deep and dark place. What brings a person to such a place? The recovery movement, with organizations such as Alcoholics Anonymous, speaks of, quote, hitting bottom. If I understand this rightly, this is the point where a person suffering from addiction can no longer deny or ignore his or her problem, where the addicted person must admit that he or she cannot solve the problem alone, and where the only possible change is improvement because it really can't get any worse. I would suggest that this applies not only to physical addictions, such as drugs or alcohol, but also may apply to psychological addictions, depression, and all other sorts of unfavorable situations. I would like to pause for a moment and allow you to think of times in your life when you may have been in such depths, or of persons in your life who may be in such depths now. Psalm 130 makes it clear that the only hope of a soul who has sunk to such depths lies in God, and specifically in his forgiving nature. As Protestants, we are accustomed to hearing as a primary teaching that salvation is indeed ours, but that it is too good to be earned. Salvation is a free and gracious gift. If God kept score with legalistic codes of right doing and wrong doing, no one could stand before him. St. Paul reminds us that while all things are lawful for the saved, not all things are beneficial. So salvation does not mean that right and wrong no longer matter. There should still be harmony between our professed faith and our works. What salvation does mean, however, is that when we hit bottom, the pit is not infinite, but that the God who created the foundation of the world is still with us. Faith in God provides the path upwards, illumined by God, out of the depths to a better place. A moment ago, I asked you to think of your own times in the depths. How did the light of faith in Christ lead you up and out? How can you help to manifest that light to those who may be in the depths now? For my part, as an adolescent at a university very far from home, I was very depressed. I was not religiously observant in any particular way at that time, although I had been baptized and confirmed as a Methodist, and the college was secular. I was talking to a student whose mind I respected and trying to understand what was wrong. He was trying to convince me that any lingering attachment I had to Christianity was undesirable, since Christianity was an irrational and inferior religion. I heard myself say, "You may believe what you see, but Christ said, 'Blessed are those who have not seen, and yet who have come to believe.'" I felt that my faith was still alive, and I saw, as clearly as if there had been a new ray of light in that dorm room which had become a spiritual dungeon to me, the way up and out. I still had so much work to do, but my faith was still there in the depths, and with my faith, hope in the power of the love of God. Of course, I wish I could say that I've never suffered since the time when I made that one good decision to stick up for God. In truth, there have been difficult times since, but I can trace a steady upward trajectory. Nothing is impossible to those who have faith in God. How easy it is to allow life in the world to diminish or to cheapen our faith, even though many of us move in mostly faithful social circles. When we drive around, we see a house of worship on every other street corner. how much defense could our faith possibly need in this time and place? The answer is that the place for God in our hearts requires constant care. Peter denied Christ overtly 3 times, fearing for his own physical safety, but then wept bitterly when the predicted cockcrow awakened him to what he had just done. You and I might deny Christ in 1,000 subtle ways, by thought, word, and deed, until the world asks us at a critical moment, like the servant of the high priest in the courtyard, "And you too are one of this man's followers?" Then the fearfully honest answer may be that there is not much of a true disciple left in us. This can be what leads us into the dark depths of which Psalm 130 speaks. A lack of faith puts us there, and only faith in the Lord can save us from it. The good news is that God is always ready to welcome us. His offer of redemption is always extended to us, even when our neglect of him has led us into the abyss, whether subtly and little by little, or dramatically and all at once. Before I conclude, I'd like to read a passage from reformer and theologian John Calvin. As you all know, Calvin is the founder of the branch of Christianity with which you were affiliated. If there were portraits of our founders at the door of Emmanuel Presbyterian Church, his portrait would hang perhaps next to one of Jesus Christ. Nonetheless, since my involvement with this church, I have often heard Calvin's ideas referred to as a foil, or in the context of heritage, which we've worked through and beyond. Here, however, is a pertinent paragraph on faith from Book 3 of Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion, as edited by Donald McKim. And I quote, "Faith rests not on ignorance, but on knowledge. And this is indeed not knowledge only of God, but of the divine will. We do not obtain salvation, either because we are prepared to embrace as true whatever the church has prescribed, or because we turn over to it the task of inquiring and knowing. But we do so when we know that God is our merciful Father, because of reconciliation effected through Christ, and that Christ has been given to us as righteousness, sanctification, and life. By this knowledge, I say, not by submission of our feeling, do we obtain entry into the kingdom of heaven." End quote. So in conclusion, I would say that we are never abandoned in the depths. However low we may sink, God's love is beneath us as well as around and above. So when we hit bottom, we are supported in our movement back up. With faith in God's forgiveness, the pit cannot be bottomless, and there is always hope. Thanks be to God.